Thank you, Eugene. Good morning, everybody. One of the privileges of being the president of a university is the ability to get to know our public leaders. In the case of U.S. Senator Michael Bennet, I've had the opportunity to get to know Michael in a couple of his different phases of his career, because Michael really exemplifies what it means to be a citizen who's committed to the public good in every sense of the word. And he's demonstrated that by first leaving a business career to serve as the superintendent of the Denver Public Schools, during which he was a champion for reform and for student success, and really blazed a trail at DPS that continues today in terms of improving the lives of students and parents. Since that time, he has joined the United States Senate, where he is also an advocate for education. So he brings a perspective to the profession that you're considering as future teachers that is very particular and is intimately familiar with the challenges and the opportunities that teaching presents. UNC was founded to be a place that prepares teachers. It is literally at the very core of what we're all about, and I'm so excited to see so many of you considering joining this profession where you change lives forever. So, Senator Bennet, come join us.
Give Kay Norton a round of applause for her leadership over so many years here at UNC, Colorado's teaching college. Good morning. I am delighted to be here and to see all of you, and I thought I might speak just for a few moments and then see if there are any questions or criticisms for me. I'm happy to take either from the student. Why don't we give the teachers that are here a round of applause, and the guidance counselors as well. We have, all of us, what really is in many ways a very precious opportunity that most human beings have never had. And that is the chance to live in a republic, a self-governing democratic republic. When Ben Franklin, who is one of the architects of that republic, and those guys, if you've studied any of this history, you'll know that they had no model on which to base the work that they were doing. They had failed experiments in self-government that hadn't worked terribly well. They had European philosophers whose work they were reading and thinking about and debating in Philadelphia, but there was no best practice for setting up a democratic republic. And they knew in the nature of a republic, unlike a monarchy or what they would call a tyranny, there wasn't anybody to tell you what to think. There wasn't anybody to tell you what your ideas should be. And they knew we would have disagreements because they knew people didn't have all the same ideas about everything. In fact, in the room where they were negotiating what became the Constitution, they didn't have the same ideas about a lot of things. And one day, Ben Franklin, who is one of the wisest founders, certainly one of the oldest, he used to tell the other people that if he was old and willing to change his mind, the other people should be willing to change their mind. He was out on the steps of Constitutional Hall, and somebody said, "Mr. Franklin, what kind of government are you creating? A monarchy or a republic?" And his answer was, "A republic if you can keep it." His answer was not a republic. He said a republic if you can keep it, because he knew the words that we've all studied, that they wrote down on a page and that have inspired human beings all over this planet to search and to seek freedom. But he knew those were just the words. What was required was that future generations of Americans would keep the republic, would take care of it and be responsible for it. And over generations and generations, that's what Americans have done. Women who demanded that the work was incomplete because women didn't have the right to vote. Abolitionists like Frederick Douglass, who said, we can never fulfill the principles of this document as long as there are human beings in this country that are enslaved. And they worked to democratize what the founders had done. And 230 years later, we have the most dynamic economy of any country in the world. We have the most capacity for self-defense of any humans that have ever existed. We're not just those 13 colonies, but we go coast to coast, the entire continental United States of America, and more than that. And now it's our responsibility to keep the republic. Your responsibility. Your responsibility. And I can't think of anything truer to what the founders were asking of the future generation of Americans than to be willing to teach. It is the most important job in our country, in this democratic republic. Because by teaching, you give people the capacity to be able to participate as citizens. And too many of the people that live in this country don't have access to high quality teaching or to high quality schools. And the result of that is, especially for kids that are living in poverty, their circumstances too often determine the outcomes of their life. Not because they're not willing to work, not because their family's not willing to work, but just because they don't have access to high quality teaching. In fact, today, as we sit here, only about 9% of the kids that are born in poverty actually graduate with a college degree, and therefore have the opportunity to go back and teach in their own communities. And what I know from having been a superintendent is, first of all, nobody that was in the Denver Public Schools when I was superintendent will remember my name. Not a single student will. But my job was to make sure they remembered their teacher's name as fondly as they could. The effort was to support them so they could do the work of teaching, because what we know from all of the analysis that's been done is that what makes the most difference in the life of a student and their ability to achieve is the quality of the teacher that they have. So we don't make it easy all the time for teachers in America. We don't pay teachers what they deserve to be paid. Sometimes we don't train them as well as they deserve to be trained, although if you're lucky enough to come here, you will be trained well to be a teacher. And sometimes they're not supported well enough. And because it's the most important profession we have, it's essential for the rest of us that are not teachers to put you at the center of our attention and to make sure we're supporting you in the 21st century. This is an exciting time to be a teacher. There's a lot of things going on with technology and with students' access to technology that didn't exist even when I was superintendent 10 years ago, that now has huge promise to make a big difference for kids in urban classrooms like the Denver Public Schools, but also in rural communities all over Colorado. The last point I want to make is this. In our communities, very often we have differences of opinion about lots of things, which is what the founders expected us to do. And the person that often bridges those disagreements are people that are educators, because they know it's important that there are different points of view, but that we ought to have the conversation in as respectful a way as we possibly can. And then we, as the founders did, we respect those differences and try to move the conversation forward. So I want to congratulate you. Actually, more than that, I want to thank you from the bottom of my heart for your willingness to be here on a Friday, for your willingness to think about doing the most important job that we have as a society, even though we don't always treat it that way. And my hope is that you'll stick with it. We need you. We have communities all over Colorado that have teacher shortages. We need you in our classrooms, and the next generation of Coloradans can build their lives based on your vision for them. So thanks for having me today. I really appreciate it. I wonder if there are any questions that anybody has about any topic. I'm happy to talk about anything. Criticisms of my speaking. No, thanks for giving me the opportunity. Yes.
I listened earlier, I think last week, you were on NPR talking about the dreamers, about DACA students. What are your thoughts on how us as teachers can support students that may be in a similar situation?
So the question was about the work on Dreamers and my advice for teachers about what you can do to support students that are in this situation. It is heartbreaking to me that we have not found a way to pass a law that will protect the Dreamers that are here, that very often, almost always, know no other country but the United States, have come here and were raised here, were brought here through no fault of their own, and are as American as any student that's sitting in this room. And it's shameful that the Congress hasn't been able to work on this. I was part of the Gang of Eight that passed comprehensive immigration reform in 2013, and then part of the Gang of Six. I don't know why we keep calling things gangs in the Senate. It's probably not a great idea. But the Gang of Six that passed the DACA, or that worked to have a bipartisan bill to address the Dreamers issue and to create a pathway to citizenship. I think it's vital at this moment for communities of educators to support our students by saying that while we can't guarantee anything, we will work very hard to advocate for you and to make sure that your voice is heard. I can tell you that any case that any teacher here has that's related to a Dreamer, where there's a concern about deportation of parents or anybody else, call my office. I have people that are working on this almost 24 hours a day to make sure we've done everything we can do to keep families together, which is challenging in these times. And I mean it. I mean, call my office. This is our job. I had a meeting not that long ago with a young woman who's a constituent of mine, comes from a suburb north of Denver, who is graduating from Yale College. She told me her story. You know, she went to a high school. She was not all that well prepared, but she got accepted, and then she spent 2 years coming up to speed, and now she's a straight A student at Yale College in New Haven, Connecticut, one of our Ivy League schools. Her father was deported 3 weeks ago. He's done nothing other than work in drywall in Colorado for all these years. So I appreciate your asking the question. In specific cases, let me help. And as a general matter, I think we just need to be supportive. Sometimes it's just about putting your hand on someone's shoulder and saying, we're glad you're here. What else? Yes.
What is your plan, or like, what do you think about the new healthcare, about the cut of Medicaid and special education funding?
We never have funded special education properly.
Yeah.
We have all kinds of mandates that we've thought up from Washington, D.C., but we've never funded it properly. So on special ed, we should fund it properly, and we should continue to fight for that. If there are things that can be done to relieve the burden of compliance with special ed rules that are not harmful to students or to teachers, I'm always open to that discussion. You know, we had those discussions when I was superintendent of the Denver Public Schools. But the main problem is money on special ed. That's not the main problem on a lot of things, but that's the main problem on special ed. On the cuts to Medicaid, I mean, we are the only country in the industrialized world that doesn't have health care for everybody. And not only that, we pay much more for it than these other countries. And not only that, we don't get as good results as a lot of these countries. That's crazy. And if people want to cut Medicaid, it seems to me that they ought to have at least a theory about how they're going to cover people in some other way. And they haven't presented a theory like that. So we have made a lot of gains in the last 10 years or so in terms of people being covered. Part of that was the Medicaid expansion. But we haven't done enough to reform our healthcare system to make it affordable for people. And to create enough competition, especially in rural parts of our state, for people to be able to buy quality health care for their families. So we have a lot more left to do there. Thanks. Yes? What are the best and worst parts of being superintendent? First of all, I hope someday you'll be a superintendent, because unlike me, you'll actually know something about K-12 education when you take the job. There was a lot of criticism because I hadn't been an educator, and there were people who said, "You've never done anything in K-12, how could you possibly do this job?" And I was actually open to that criticism. In other words, I thought it might actually be true. In the event, what turned out to be the case was, like anything else, if you have a team of people who have complementary strengths and weaknesses, you can move things forward. The best part, it was, I'll say this, it is the best job I will ever have. I love being superintendent. I loved it. And every day I got up with a sense of mission and a sense of that the work we were all trying to do was important work. And actually we've made a lot of progress, and maybe that's the best part of it. I mean, this year, more than 60, I think it was 62% or 63% more kids graduated and went to college this year from the Denver Public Schools than in 2005. And the Latino graduation rate in the Denver Public Schools has increased by over 120%. And the number of kids that are getting, thank you, yeah, it's good. And the number of kids that are getting 3s and above in their AP test has dramatically increased from what it was, meaning people are more prepared to go to college. And we, as a district, we went from being 6th in teacher compensation of any district in the Denver metro area to leading in teacher compensation because of hard decisions that we had to make. So those are the things that make me feel good about the continuous improvement that district has made, partly while I was there, but also after I left, which is very important. The thing I am least, or find most troubling about it, because there wasn't anything about the job itself that I didn't like. I mean, there was a lot of conflict in the job, but we were all trying to do something useful. There's still a very stubborn achievement gap in the Denver Public Schools, because even though everybody's achievement has increased, the gaps between Anglo students and students of color still persist. And that's very frustrating to me, although all it means is that we have more work to do. It was a great job, a great job.
Reminder, say one more.
Okay.
As a non-citizen with American babies from a country with the most fantastic healthcare on the planet, I want to thank you for the work you're doing in those areas to bring everyone up to speed. But what project are you working on right now that you're passionate about? Is there something that you and your office is focused on or anything else right now?
There are a lot of things. I mean, I think that I've spent many, many hours in the last months on the immigration issues that we've talked. I mean, a lot of time in the time that I've been in the Senate, but it's been very, very intense in the last months. I am working to develop a bill that would provide an opportunity for rural communities in this country to build or refurbish the infrastructure they have. There are there's water infrastructure all over the state that's 50 years old or more than 50 years old that needs to be worked on. And we just, as the federal government, we haven't done anything really to be useful there. So I'm spending time on that. I'm spending time on the Farm Bill as well, which is important to Colorado. So this is a challenging moment. I mean, we have in the present somebody who has a unique view about the role of American institutions and things like freedom of the press. And actually, I want to say a word about that before they take me off the stage, because Kate said things like freedom of the press. Press, I'll say, first, before I do that, as a general matter, I view my job as making sure we're creating more opportunity, not less, for the people that are coming after us. That's what I think my job is now. That's what I think my job was as superintendent, and that's what I think your job is. All these people that want to be teachers that are in this room, that's what it's about. And that, I can't think of a way that would be better doing than by being a teacher. While I have you here, and I have 3 daughters of my own who are 18, 17, and 13. And I know, it's brutal. And I spent a couple of days, one day at home this week with my 13-year-old who's sick. She had a cold. They go to the Denver Public Schools. And she finally reluctantly decided to go to school yesterday, although she didn't feel all that. And she's actually back at home today, sick again, because her father forced her to go to school prematurely. But I texted her yesterday, and I said, "How do you feel?" And she said, "I feel terrible. I'm so sick." And I said, "Oh, and then I wrote back and said, "Do you want me to come pick you up?" And I didn't hear anything back. And then about an hour later, because I was leaving the house and we were done, I had to go, so I called her to tell her, if you need me to get you, I have to come now. And then I heard all this noise, and I said, "Ann, what are you doing?" And she sounded fine, by the way. She didn't sound sick. She sounded fine. And she said, "I'm protesting." And I said, "What are you protesting?" And she said, "Well, it's about the Florida shooting." And then I said, "Who's with you doing this?" And she said, "The entire middle school." So she's ended up in bed again because she raised her voice. But the point I want to make is this. When you hear this talk now in Washington, and it's something that politicians on both sides, but particularly the president's talking about, this idea of fake news, I want you to think twice when you hear this. And when I meet with middle school students and high school students, I ask them all the time, "Do you write papers?" And if the answer is no, that leads to an entirely different conversation. But if the answer is yes, and I ask them, do you do your research on the internet? And they say, "Yeah, we do." And I ask, do you have to distinguish between edited content, or curated content, I sometimes call it, and somebody just shooting their mouth off on the internet? And people say, "Yeah, we do." And I say, "Well, why do you have to do that?" And they say, "Because our teachers will fail us if we don't rely on reliable content." And to me, it would seem that middle school standard of writing a paper ought to apply to politicians in Washington, D.C. And that we ought to embrace the fact that the founding fathers didn't just say we're going to tolerate press, but we're going to celebrate freedom of the press. That it's going to be a fundamental part of who we are. And it is up to us as Americans, if we are going to persist and succeed in this democratic republic, it's up to us to distinguish between what is edited content and what is somebody's opinion on the internet. It's not up to somebody else to attack the leading journalists in America and to say that they're going to ignore that edited content. It is up to us to make sure we are doing the job of middle school students. So I hope you will do that. I intend to continue to try to do that. Please enjoy the rest of your day, and thank you so much for letting me spend a few minutes with you. I really appreciate it.
Thank you, everybody. Thank you, Senator Bennet, and what a great way to frame the profession of teaching in terms of what it means to the United States as a republic.